Hello, hello, hello. My name is Robert. I am the recovery guy, and you have entered into The Fix.
Hey, welcome back. This is Robert, the recovery guy, and I'm excited to be in studio tonight. I have my good friend Jason who is joining me. I'll let him introduce himself in just a moment. And I will say that Jason and I have worked on projects together. I'll let him talk about his own recovery, but there's no other person that I can think of that can articulate and help you understand, help all of us understand the importance of steps 1, 2, and 3. If there's anything that is consistent about the men and women that Jason sponsor and mentors, is that they have a full grasp on steps 1, 2, and 3. And we're going to talk about that tonight. So let me introduce you to Jason and let Jason say hello. Go ahead, Jason.
Okay. Well, hello. My name's Jason Trimble. Sobriety date is April 3rd of 2013. And grateful to be here with Robert tonight.
Wonderful. And I appreciate that. And, before we launch into our conversation, Jason, as you're quite aware, in the forward to the first edition, it shows, and this is one of my stumbling blocks where I get frustrated, to show other alcoholics precisely how we have recovered is the main purpose for this book. For them, we hope these pages will prove so convincing that no further authentication will be necessary. We think this account of our experiences will help everyone to better understand the alcoholic. Many do not comprehend that the alcoholic is a very sick person, and besides, we are sure that our way of living has advantages for us all. So I tell people all the time, Jason, let's talk about this first. We're not good people trying to get better. We're sick people trying to get well.
Yes, absolutely. No, I agree with that. That was a big stumbling block for me early in recovery. Another big stumbling block was hearing that people had recovered from a seemingly hopeless state of mind and body. And to me, it didn't make sense because I'd been in and out of these rooms for so many years that I just, it was a stumbling block. I got kind of mad when I first heard the word recovered, because I thought, nah, we're always recovering. We're always recovering. Well, today, 12 years later, I'm seeing recovered, and that the old timers that came before me actually showed me the process.
It's interesting that you bring that up, because my sponsor, ever since Jack passed away, Slow Will has been my sponsor since January of 2019, and he's got 45 years sobriety now. And when I first met him back in 1986 in the rooms of Las Vegas, he said, "My name is Slow Will. I'm a happy, grateful, recovered alcoholic." And I went to this guy and said, "You SOB, you arrogant son of a gun, how can you say that you're happy, you're grateful, you're recovered?" And he said to me, you'll love this, Jason. He said, "If you've got a few minutes, sit down. I'll show in the first 164 pages of the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous how I can be those things." So it took me a while to get my head around it, but almost from day one, it was, no, it's here, it's written. You got to go find it and make this true for you. Do you find, is that your process that you had to go through to find it for you?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, when I got here, I was flat broke, busted, and just miserable, and I didn't see any future. I was the guy. I always ask this question: is anybody ever been so hopeless that they're afraid to have hope? Well, yeah. That was me when I walked through the doors of that recovery is 12 years ago. I was so out of hope and tired of failing over and over, that I just didn't think that I didn't know if there was really any hope for a guy like me.
You bring up something interesting, because before we think there's hope, we have to view ourselves as hopeless. And I think this is where I know some of the men and women that you sponsor, and they're very well grounded. How do you help someone, Jason, move from, okay, it's important that they see hope, but if I don't see myself as hopeless, aren't I going to miss something along the way? Aren't I going to think, am I going to think I'm better than I actually am?
Right. Well, yeah, I think that's the catalyst. Is I've heard it said that the further down the scale you go, the better your chances are of staying.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of that rung true with me when I came here. I really, I had burned down another relationship, lost another family to my addiction, and of course, my home went into foreclosure. I lost everything I owned again, and that's where it ended up taking me. So that was the catalyst. I think that's really ultimately what it came down to, was having that experience of being so hopeless that I really was. That was the catalyst to want to do something different.
So that brings me to another thought. When I was in high school, there was the handball courts where everyone was getting high, or B-head, as we called it, the boys' restroom in the B corridor. And then there was the super jocks, the superheroes. And I wasn't good enough to hang around the good people, and I wasn't bad enough to be with the bad people. So I was sort of stuck in the middle. And I think sometimes, Jason, in the rooms of AA, of recovery, because AA isn't the only path, but in the rooms of recovery itself, I hear some stories where I think, man, I'm not as sick as you. And then there's other stories that I hear, it's like, well, that's all you did? So where do you find yourself understanding that you're going to hear things on both sides of the spectrum? How do you find you? How did you find Jason, where you said, where like you earlier said, I'm hopeless? How did you find yourself in the midst of that swing?
Well, there's a line in the book that says, we learned that we had, there's a couple things I want to go to. First off, I'll talk about the first line in More About Alcoholism. It says, most of us were unwilling to admit that we were real alcoholics.
Yeah.
And no person likes to think himself bodily and mentally different than his fellows. And I think that that's a universal truth across the board in these rooms. I mean, how many of us really get here and have really bought into the fact of just how powerless that I really am? Not only that, then there's another line there that says that we learned that we had to fully concede to our innermost selves that we were alcoholics. This was the first step in recovery. That says that like as if it might have been a process to get there, and it was for me. I didn't get it on the first try. I had so many great ideas. You couldn't get anything through to me, because I knew everything. So therefore, I wasn't willing to listen, and over the years, as I got beaten down a little bit more in my disease, and it kept getting worse, never better, I finally got to that point where I came looking for recovery. That's when the process started for me, is when I finally got to that point where I was willing to come in here, and instead of sitting in rooms listening for the differences in everybody's story, even the person that was new that wasn't ready for recovery, I hear similarities in their stories too, because I'd been there too. Now, so that was the turning point for me.
How important, Jason, because we all come to that place, or those of us who have recovered and who live in recovery, just in case there's a naysayer out there, you and I are recovered, but every day we stay in recovery, which are steps 10, 11, and 12. But when I was faced with honesty, step 1 is all about honesty. And I came to that point at 71 days sober. I had one relapse. Once I decided to stop drinking, I had plenty of relapses before that, but I was never Robert P. alcoholic. So I was faced with either not drinking or being honest. And Jason, I just couldn't be honest. So I chose, even though I admitted to my innermost self, I thought there was another way for me. I thought there was a door number 3. And boy, was I wrong. I had to be honest in the rooms, not only honest to myself. I had to admit to my innermost self that I was alcoholic, but then I had to go and tell you so you could help me. Would you agree with that?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, it was I had for so many years is that I couldn't get honest with myself, let alone with anybody else.
Yeah.
I thought if you didn't know what I was doing, well, I didn't need to tell you anything.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So, but the real honesty came with me getting honest with myself about them ABCs in the program. And that was really taking a look and at those ABCs. The ABCs in the book say: A, we were alcoholic, we could not manage our own lives. B, probably no human power could have relieved our alcoholism. C, God could and would if he were sought. Being convinced, we were now at step 3. So my being convinced, it took me a little bit of time to get thoroughly convinced, but I finally got to that point where I had all reservations burned out of me. There was no more great ideas that, I can do a little bit of this, I just can't do that, because I played musical chairs for a lot of years, and to me, musical chairs in the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous is like changing seats on the Titanic.
Yeah.
It's still going down. So as long as I still think that I can do a little bit of this instead of that, well, I'm not really conceding to the proposition that I'm powerless. I'm still thinking that I've got, control, and it always inevitably is going to bring me back to the bottle. And so
you bring up something that most people, like in most meetings, the ABCs, God couldn't, would if he were sought, they stop there. And I love how the next line, being convinced, we are now at step 3. And,
that's right.
Our book is meant to be suggestive only. Here are the steps we took that are suggestions, right? So we go from suggestion, which means I can do it or I cannot do it, to being thoroughly convinced. How do I see? And that's in chapter 5. That's in chapter 5 and how it works. But so much more foundational understanding needs to occur. Like when, the second half of step 1, I was powerless over alcohol, that my life had become unmanageable. Jason, in 5 days that I was out there, one thing that amazed me, it didn't amaze me that I drank because I wasn't willing to get honest. It baffled me that I got worse off than I was in 5 days. I was worse off than I ever was in less than a week. I was in a hotel room. I couldn't pay. I had nowhere to go. I had no one who would want me. Once they found out it was me, they were gone or never invited me anyway.
Yeah.
And so my bottom was, it was more severe, but it was quick. And I think that's what made it so severe. And it helped me understand. It's obvious that you and I and others like us can admit that we're powerless over alcohol, but that whole surrender that my life had become unmanageable, that had to be graphic for me. Was it really graphic for you?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's, the reason why I like to throw that being convinced in there is because there's really no place in the book that tells you to not drink or don't drink or anything like that. As a matter of fact, it's just the opposite of that. There's a spot in the book that talks about, if you're unsure if you're alcoholic, it might be worth a good case of the jitters to do a test. Try some controlled drinking. Try drinking too. Try it more than once. And see, and I know if you're anything like me, what happens is as soon as I get about halfway into that second drink, it's a bad day for a test day. So and so just came into the club. I'm going to go have a drink with so and so, and and I would continue to do that. And so there's something about me that's bodily and mentally different than my fellows that I know. I now know. I finally got to that point where I knew that I mustn't drink. I couldn't drink. I couldn't drug. But how do I stay stopped? That was the key. The key for me was how does a guy like me stay stopped? Because I knew a long time before I finally got sober that if I pick this drink up, it's probably going to end up bad. Because I was like you. I was hitting those bottoms. I would hit a new low 4 or 5 days into my new relapse.
Yeah.
And I just couldn't figure this thing out. This thing I think is so important is that there's nobody around here. No human power means exactly what it says. It means that, having the right relationship or the right sponsor or anything like that is necessarily going to do it. And what it's asking me is to be open to some spiritual principles. Now, that was a rough one when I first got started as well. I'm just like the book says, nearly half of us got here claiming atheist or agnostic. I didn't want to hear anything about any of that. But, I was broken enough to where I was receptive enough to where I was willing to take some suggestions, and that's where my journey began. And I want to say one other thing that my sponsor told me when I was new is he said, Jason, you don't want to know what your problem is? And I said, what? And he said, your problem is the inability to live a life that works on your own power. And that took me a few years to understand what he was talking about, but he was right. When I'm in charge of my life, it's it's a shit show to say the least. It's for me, it's gels, it's homelessness, it's I never know where I'm going to end up. I might take a drink here and end up out in Florida. You never know, and not know I'm there.
Yeah. Yeah. I ended up passed out, came to under an overhead in St. George, Utah, when I lived in Las Vegas.
Oh, yeah.
And I didn't know how I got there. And my car was still in the parking garage at Binion's Horseshoe, and times like that. You bring up something really interesting, and it's a great transition for you and I to take a look at step 2. As you well know, if anyone knows, you do, in the doctor's opinion, it said, and I love this portion because it is it's Dr. Silkworth, and he's talking from a medical standpoint. Going back to we're sick people trying to get well. He said, men have cried out to me in sincere and despairing appeal, Doctor, I cannot go on like this. So the alcoholic, the person suffering, really understands that it's life and death. I can't go on like this. He says, I have everything to live for. I must stop, but I cannot. That's that powerlessness that you and I have talked about. You must help me. So he's starting to understand that probably no human power. He doesn't realize it. He thinks a doctor can help him. He said, talking from a doctor's standpoint, he says, faced with this problem, if the doctor is honest with himself, he must sometimes feel his own inadequacies. In other words, he can't help this guy. No matter how badly this guy wants to be helped, he cries out, help me, please. And he says his own inadequacy. And that's still true, Jason. He said, although he gives all that is in him, the doctor, it is often not enough. One feels that something more than a human power is needed to produce the essential psychic change. Let's talk about the transformation, because we've gone from hopeless in step 1 to that thing you were calling about hope in step 2, which is our introduction. How do you reconcile that? How do you help your newcomer get to that point?
Well, the big thing is this is a program of action, and so it's it's not a spectator sport. You can't sit on the sidelines and hope to get sober. So I think a big part of it, the way that I was taught, is get involved. If you want to learn how to play for the for a ball team or something, maybe the Florida Gators or whatever, then you gotta practice. And so it's the same thing around here. I had to get with people that were like-minded people that were going through the big book, people that were actually going out and doing activities in the evenings and stuff like that, become part of the fellowship. And that's really where things started to shift for me, is when I started to become part of. There's a saying in Alcoholics Anonymous that Alcoholics Anonymous is the biggest known group to men that no one wanted to be a part of.
Yeah.
So I don't think I'm any different than anybody else. I did not want to be a part of this outfit. Today, it's the single most important and best decision that I've ever made, and I'm just so grateful.
How and I'm grateful also because we're great friends and we've done a great amount of work together in the field of recovery. We know each other's sponsees, and it's a privilege being your friend and watching you work with other people. So is there something that you look for, Jason, when you're in, for the lack of a better term, interviewing or considering adding someone to your family, because how much that will take out of you and how you have to adjust your schedule to meet whatever need they have? Is there some criteria that you look for that helps you understand that the effort you put out will, at least you're not spinning your wheels, you're not, because Lord knows you don't need any practice, right? You just need people who are willing to get through. Does that make sense?
Yes, absolutely. And how I know is I watch their feet. It's as simple as that.
Okay.
Because here's the thing. I mean, you come in here and there's a part in the book that says we don't want to pronounce anybody alcoholic. So I don't want to sit and try to, diagnostic and tell you what I think, or maybe you should be in a different meeting or anything. I don't believe in that. As if you come here with the desire to want to change and do something different, then let's all work with you. I'm willing to work with you. I'm willing to try to help you out. And I'll know within a matter of a short period of time whether it's going to work out or not. I just watch your feet. If you're the guy that tells me that you're, oh yeah, I've been convinced, I want some, I just can't stand it, but then you're showing up to one meeting a month or something like that. To me, it's not telling me that you're convinced.
Yeah.
I want to see the guy that's showing up to a meeting every day, that's really at the bottom and really wants to change. That those are the people where I'm going to spend my time with. That's just how simple as that.
So when you see a person, Jason, do you, let's say I'm a newcomer, I'm 4 or 5 days sober, and I come to you and I hear about you, because obviously everyone freaking knows you, certainly in Utah County. And so I think it'd be a good idea to have Jason T be my sponsor, because we're all looking for that gravitas, we're all looking for that attaboy, but you have a great reputation of helping people, of loving people sober. So if I come to you and say, hey, will you sponsor me? Are you looking for something in me? Do you stand off? What do you do to help evaluate?
Yes, I'm looking for 3 key things. Let's see here. We kind of froze up here for a second. Wait. Okay, there you are. Okay, recording in progress. Okay, you were asking me if there's some things I'm looking for. Absolutely.
And what are those things? Because
it's honesty, the 3 indispensables of the program. I'm looking for honesty. I'm looking for you to be open-minded, and I'm looking for somebody that's willing.
Okay.
The how of the program: honesty, open-mindedness, and willingness. And those are the 3 indispensables of the program. We have to have those in order to have success around here. So if a person can't get honest, well, then they're not going to be able to get sober. If a person can't be open-minded to a new way of life, well, that's going to be a hindrance too. I had to set aside all of my old ideas when I got here to the Rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous, because I didn't know anything, as much as I thought I knew. When I got in here, I had a good sponsor that would just cut to the chase and just tell me, no, you don't know anything, and you need to set everything aside and work the steps. It was all about the steps, getting into the steps. And so, part of my process was just, I would do what's called the set aside prayer, every day. And what that looks like is, Lord, please help me to set aside everything I think I know about you, about the 12 steps, about my own recovery. Please help me to set aside all my old ideas to have a new experience in all these areas. And I just started like that, and that started to shift something in me. And I started to become more open-minded to what I was learning around here, and being open-minded towards the steps. I started to have hope for the first time in years. I started to actually feel like, maybe there's something to this thing.
Yeah.
I think I was probably 6 months. I was like 6 months sober before I thought, my God, I've been sober like 6 months. I can't believe it. I had to do a double on that. And have I really not had anything? Oh my gosh, maybe there's something to this.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So, but all of this stuff helped change. And that's what I look for. I look for the people that have that in them. And again, I tell people this too. If I'm going to work with someone, I tell them, how I'm going to know if you're in this or not? I watch your feet. What are your feet doing? Are you coming to meetings? Are you talking with your sponsor? Are you communicating? Are you going to some of the literature meetings as well? Are you going out and becoming part of the fellowship? All of those things are such a big step into the road to recovery.
Well, let's look at, because I've heard you use this line before, and I agree with the big book. Let's talk about step 3. It says lack of power. That was our dilemma on page 45. We had to find a power by which we could live, and it had to be a power greater than ourselves, obviously. But where and how are we to find this power? And in the beginning, Jason, that power, and it's why I went to so many meetings. Not only was I unemployable, but, I had nowhere else to go. But there was an attraction. There was something that I couldn't quite put my finger on because it was invisible, and yet I could see in the rooms. Guys like you, sober 6 months is, when you're sober 6 days, 6 months is a freaking eternity. And dare say guys were sober a year and 2 years and 15 years and 20 years. I'm thinking, I don't know what they got, but I want to catch whatever they have. So in the beginning, lack of power obviously was my dilemma, because I had to give up powerless and admit my powerless in step 1, in the insanity in step 2. But then I had to be willing to turn my will and my life over to the care of God, as I would understand God, in step. And that was kind of scary for me in many ways, because where guys like you and I come from, when we gave over something, it means we lost. It didn't mean we were winning, right?
Right. Yes, that's right. And you bring up some real good points. There's a line in How It Works that I really like. It says, remember, we deal with alcohol, cunning, baffling, powerful. Without help, it's too much for us. There is one who has all power. That one is God. May you find him now.
Yeah.
I love that line, because I was always the guy that thought, well, I'm not looking to find God today because I've got all kinds of problems and I've got all kinds of sins and stuff that I'm committing and all this stuff. So I'm just not really that interested in that, and thank God for the people in the rooms that showed me, look, it doesn't matter where you're at. God meets you where you're at.
Yeah.
He's in the now. He's in the present moment. And when I started to look at things like that, and I stopped looking back into the past and living my life, when I got here, I was, I couldn't be present. I was always either worried about things, all this stuff that from my past, carrying this guilt, shame, and remorse, or I was always future tripping, worrying about what am I going to do when I get out of here, and where am I going to live, and I just couldn't be present. And I just had the best sponsorship and great guys around me that just taught me, this program's done one day at a time. Stay present.
Yeah.
Practice the program. Do that third step prayer and see what happens. You know what I mean? And I just started to do that. And I'll tell you, my experience now at 12 years into this is I've got so much belief that God will show up for that newcomer. I know he will. Yeah. And so I just want to, and I encourage them to practice those prayers in the book and watch what happens. And I won't ever bail them out. I won't, if they don't have money for something or something, I get them to rely on God, become God reliant rather than, Jason reliant or something, because we don't have the power to fix these people. And so, that was the big shift for me. The other thing, what you were talking about too, I really liked about, it's what people saw, right? It was the evidence that you saw. Just like when Ebby carried the message to Bill, and Bill pushed a drink across the table to him, and Ebby said, "No, thank you, I got religion." And Bill was baffled. He was like, "What in the hell? What is going on here?" But he did say though that he seen something in that guy. He goes, "I couldn't deny the evidence that something was inwardly reorganized in that person." The evidence, and I'll tell you, and I know this is true because not only mine and your experience and what we see, but what about our families?
Yeah.
My God, I got two brothers in the rooms now that are putting together some time. And I've had two sisters that have showed up too. And I didn't try to sell them on Alcoholics Anonymous. It was the evidence that they seen. They seen me doing things that I'd never done, and they were blown away. Yeah. And so that's kind of what, there's a saying that you may be the only big book a person ever reads.
Right.
And so, how are you conducting yourself? What are you doing? Are you working the program, or are you just being a dry alcoholic?
That's going back, and I appreciate you getting so deep into that. Let's dial it back just a minute, because what you're talking about is seeing myself as sick, trying to get well, because we understand God, whoever God is to a given individual. It can be anything that person wants that God to be. But when we see ourselves as bad people trying to get better, God's not going to like me. But and that's easy to fall back into, because even though I'm sick trying to get well, not bad trying to get good, it doesn't mean that I didn't do a lot of bad things. It just meant I wasn't a bad person. I was a very sick person. So because a lot of times that could really be a stumbling block for a person who would have a tendency to hold back on turning. I'm not going to turn my will and my life over to the care of God, but because he's going to reject me. And I like in We Agnostics on page 46, it says that we found that God does not make too hard of terms with those who seek him. How do you help someone be convinced of that? God's not going to make it difficult. I know you have a lot of guilt, because so many of us are ex-husbands who were kicked out. We lost our kids. Like you said, we lost our home. You probably can't say how many jobs you lost. All those things. How do you help others? Because I know how you've been helped, but how do you help others make that transition? Because as long as I see myself as bad trying to get better, God's not going to love me. God's not going to care about me. And I'm not going to believe that God, it's an all punishing God, not an all forgiving God. God's going to make me be better before he loves me the way I need to be loved. Does that make sense?
Yep. Yep. It totally makes sense. And I know that that's probably the biggest hurdle for somebody in recovery is that little hurdle right there. Whether I'm willing to be open to having a spiritual experience like that. And the only thing I really do is I try to I share my own experience.
That's good.
I've been to the very gates of hell, and that's, and the thing is that, through all of my darkest moments and stuff, God's been there for me. And I didn't think so, but he has been. And, and the thing that I'm grateful for today is that he didn't just pull me out of those situations. Right. I got to sit there in the valley for a while. And I'm grateful for that, because now that I've got this power back in my life, I don't ever want to do anything to hinder that. I'm doing everything I need to take hold of it. So what I do is I share my experience, and I just tell them, listen, man, you don't believe, you can just take the actions. You don't necessarily need to believe, but do you believe that I believe? Because I definitely believe. And, from there, if they're open to it, they're going to have the experience. Like I said, you and I both know God's going to show up for them if they're willing to do the program, if they're willing to start working these steps. It's just how it works. And how that shows up, usually I could share several experiences of my own that happened in my early recovery that were just one of those things was, well, wow, was that odd or was it God?
Yeah.
There was too many experiences that happened right out the gate that were almost impossible odds of things happening that just happened right on time. And so that was what got me to actually start paying attention, is I just had some experiences that blew my doors open, not that told me, what are the odds that I have a check show up at this house? I'm broke. I don't have anything. And, it's just enough money to not to, have me go out on another bender, but it shows up right on time. And it's just enough to get me to work every day and back until I get my first check.
Yeah.
What are the odds out of, in the house I had foreclosed on probably 10 years earlier? What are those odds? I mean, it's almost an impossible odd. And then, I had other things happen. Like I had some money in a stock account that I didn't know about. And, and my dad said, I think you got some money in a stock account or something. And this was when I was brand new. I was broke. I didn't have any money. I didn't have a vehicle, no license, like a lot of us get here.
Yeah.
And, and I thought, no, and I was still kind of at that hopeless spot. No, not for me. No, I couldn't have any kind of luck like that. And, lo and behold, some little penny stocks that I'd put some money in went up, and I had like $2,200, and my brother had called me and said, hey, I've got a Honda Civic over here that you can pick up for $2,000 if you come down here right now and get it. So, what are the odds of that kind of stuff? And I see this happen literally with every newcomer that I work. I mean, literally, if they're willing to get into this thing and really work it and stuff, inevitably these things start to happen for them. I could sit here all day and tell you stories that are just amazing, blow you away.
And I love that, because that's the kind of hope that men like you and me and women like Melissa and Whitney and Heather, that's the kind of hope that we share with others, because, in the beginning, Jason, we're especially before faith takes root.
Yeah.
And we begin trusting God on faith. Obviously, faith, the Bible says that faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things unseen. So we're we're supposed to trust something we can't see, which is fine and dandy, but we are alcoholic and drug addict and Lord knows what else we are. Well, everyone knows what else I am. And we're very tangible people. If we can't see it, taste it, smell it, touch it, lay evidence. So we don't believe it. We don't believe in faith. We don't believe in something. If it's not monetary, if it's not a woman, if it's not something we can put our hands on, we don't have a tendency to believe it, do we? So to make that leap,
Yeah.
and just staying firm, and that's why I really appreciate you bringing up one day at a time, and all of a sudden you're 6 months sober, and you wonder how you got there.
Yeah.
That's quite the transition for a person who is as tangible as we were.
Yep. Yes. Exactly. The other thing is too, like when we're brand new, one of the big stumbling blocks too is fear.
Yeah.
We've lived in fear, and that's a discussion for another day. But that's definitely one of the things too that and there's a prayer in the book for fear too, to help commence to outgrow fear. And but all of those experiences, the fear, not knowing where I'm going to live, and all of a sudden something drops in my lap, not knowing where I'm going to work, something drops in my lap before I get kicked out of my sober living. Just all of these experiences, what they did is they really kind of had me start believing. That was where I came to believe. I was like, wow, dude, this is crazy, man. I've just been saying this third step prayer every day. I've been working these steps. I've been, I don't know why God would show up for, and here, all of these things just seem to be dropping in my lap, and that's that was how I started to grow some faith. They say faith is hope with a track record.
I like that.
And that's what it was for me. Is I just I just would hope that something would pan out, and lo and behold, things did. And so that's where I started to develop faith for myself. But I know all these new guys got to go through that same process I did. And if they can't do it, then it's going to be another debacle. Until they get to the point where they're ready to surrender to the program and actually do what we do to stay sober.
That's it. Do what we do to stay sober. It's not as if, this is so timely, and you bring up such great inspiration in me. It's not like they, I've been at this thing for over 39 years. You've been at it 12 years. Between us, we're at 51 years sobriety, which is a long ass time. Mm-hmm. And it's not like they had to reinvent the program. They didn't say, wow, Jason's here. He's a sick SOB. We got to do something else because this isn't going to work. Or Robert is here now. What the hell are we going to do with this guy? Because he is sick. He's sicker than anyone. They didn't do that. They just said, here's what we did. Here's the path you have to follow. Matter of fact, Max Brooks, who's since moved away, and he was my sponsor when I came back from a relapse. And Jason, the third step prayer, is so important because when I came back from my relapse, I had a God appointment with Max, and the first thing he did, Jason, was get me on my knees, and I said, what do we do? And he said, we're going to do the third step prayer right now. And he said, and I like that. God, I offer myself to thee to build with me and to do with me as thou wilt. And then I asked him, I said, what do I do next? He said, whatever I say. And I thought, wait a minute, what do you mean, whatever you say?
That's perfect.
He said, we can be friends, or I can be your sponsor, but I can't be both. Because if I'm your friend, I'm going to take it too easy on you. If I'm your sponsor, you're not going to think I like you. So you tell me what you want me to be, and I'll be that. And
Yep.
he was sincere, Jason. This guy loved me in ways. I mean, he knew about me, and he still
Yep.
loved me. And it was so important that I just said, okay, I don't know what I'm doing, and I don't know if I should trust you, but that guy out there is going to kill himself if he doesn't get out of it. And we jumped right into the third step because I already knew I was powerless. I already knew life had become unmanageable, and I already knew I was insane. That's why I drank.
Yes.
The only thing left for me to do was become willing to turn my will and my life over to the care of God. You have to be able to relate to. I know you do.
Oh, for sure. Yes. Yeah, that was me too. I was broken, flat, and busted, and I knew I just was like I knew I needed to do something different. So I was open to whatever suggestions were set before me, and it didn't matter if I liked it or not. I knew that I needed to do it because I knew that what I was getting wasn't working. I tried it for 40. I was 43 when I got sober, so I tried it for 43 years on my own power, trying to do things my way, and it just didn't work. Right. That was the being convinced.
Yeah. It's interesting because we want to wrap up here, but you talked about, and I'm so glad that you brought it up. We are powerless over alcohol, could not manage our own lives. So after they talk about the 12 steps, they talk about steps 1, 2, and 3, because the ABCs is honesty, open-minded, probably no human power could have relieved my alcoholism, which is step 2. And step 3 is C, that God could and would if he were sought. And I think sometimes, Jason, we misconstrue what I need to be convinced of.
Yep.
I need to be convinced of A, B, and C. I don't need to be convinced of steps 4 through 12. I need to be convinced of steps 1, 2, and 3. That is the only, because that's what they talk about right after that, right?
Yep.
The step 3, we have the third step prayer, then we launch into step 4. So I think a lot of times, and why I wanted to talk to you tonight, is a lot of times we get too far ahead of ourselves. We hand someone a big book and tell them to read chapter 5, and they haven't even surrendered yet.
Yeah.
Telling them how to get better, and they don't even think they're sick.
Yep.
How do we overcome that, Jason? What do we do as men who have recovered to help create that? I know what you do. Because I've put you in the rooms countless times. But how do you convey that to that newcomer who is going to die from a treatable condition? What do you do?
Yeah. Well, that's the trick, because and I know you'll know this. The longer that you're here, the more you realize how sick we were when we got here, especially. And it's just a process. It's hard to, it's really hard to try to tell anybody how sick they are. I think them first few steps have to come from within. It has to get to a point where you're really wanting something different. And if you are, then you're willing to accept the fact that you're insane, and what the life you're living is absolutely total insanity. And the excuses that you try to conjure up, alcoholism is a disease of denial, and we get so used to trying to cover our tracks that we really aren't capable of being honest with ourselves or anybody when we get here initially, I think, because we're so used to trying to, cover things up, and these excuses, and why did you relapse? Well, it's because so-and-so died, or it was because of this, or it just, page 23 of the book. The disease centers in our mind rather than our body. If you ask the alcoholic why they had that last relapse, they may offer you any one of 100 alibis. These may have certain plausibility, but it doesn't make sense in the plight an alcoholic drinking bout creates.
Man, gosh, Jason, you and I, obviously, we could talk for frickin' ever. because we're in such great agreement and alignment.
Mhm.
But even what you talked about there, going back to the doctor's opinion, it says exactly that in different words. Men and women drink essentially because they like the effect produced by alcohol. The sensation is so elusive. While they admit it is injurious, they cannot, after a time, differentiate the true from the false. So I don't know up from down. I don't know light from dark. I don't know good from evil. I don't know anything. All I know is there's something uncomfortable in my life, and I drank to become comfortable. Father Martin, I love this man on Chalk
He's
Talk that
great.
says alcohol
Love that
puts
guy.
asleep that which would make us feel uncomfortable, and so psychologists, why did they drink? Why? Well, because he was uncomfortable or she was uncomfortable, so they drank, they used. Now you can fill a library with why they were that, but that's why they did it.
Yeah,
So your relapse and my relapse, they might have appeared different, but they were the same. There was something I was not doing instead of not drinking. And the same with you, same with everyone who's ever gone out. We can color it. I can say it's my wife or my employer. If you had my job, if you had my mom, if you had my dad, if you had my finances, bullshit. You drank because you chose to drink, just like you and we stay sober because we choose to stay sober, right?
that's right. That's exactly right. And, the recipe for success is lined out in that book. And really everything hinges on whether you're convinced of how hopeless you really are, and
Yeah.
how when you're in charge of your life, it's just how chaotic it's been for the last how many ever years. And then if that's the case, then, like I say, step two is or step three, just an easy transition to be open to some spiritual principles.
Well,
So,
to wrap this up, Jason, because I know you're in the rooms as often as your life will allow you to be. When you share in a meeting, how do you convey steps 1, 2, and 3 to the newcomer who is in the room? What do you say? What do you do almost to entice them to join you in your quest for continuing your recovered life? What do you do concerning steps 1, 2, and 3 to encourage them that they can have 12 years also?
yeah. Well, I'll tell you what I do as far as that goes. I like to share with them some promises. I like I like the 10th step promises. Getting placed in we cease fighting. Anyone, even alcohol, for by now sanity will have returned. So, there's promises that as you work through the rest of these steps, the problem gets removed and you don't even think about liquor or drugs anymore. Also, one of the things I like to point out to these guys too, which is one of the lines in this is in the book. It's in the family afterward. It's talking about kind of as a result of working the steps, like a gaunt prospector drawn over the last ounce of food. Our pick struck gold. Joy at our release from a lifetime of frustration knew no bounds. Father feels he has struck something better than gold. For a time, he may try to hug the new treasure to himself. He may not see at once that he has barely scratched a limitless load, which will pay dividends only if he minds it for the rest of his life and insists on giving away the entire product.
Wow.
That I love that.
That's beautiful.
Because that's, I would have never thought that, that what we find here is something better than gold, better than any money, any monetary money that you could make or anything like that. It's just the Alcoholics Anonymous has given me a life that just like I was promised when I got here by my sponsor. There's a life beyond what you can comprehend for yourself right here in the program if you'll just work the steps. And so that's my hope, is that that not a whole lot's done in the first three, other than just having the willingness to get on with the rest of the program, and it's a simple program, but it's not easy,
Yeah.
because we gotta change. We got to make a lot of changes and stuff. So, but I know anybody can do it. I've never seen anybody too dumb to get this program. I've seen a lot of people that are too smart to get it, though.
Yeah.
So, it's thank God for that.
Amen. Well, thank God for you. And ladies and gentlemen, now you know why I love Jason like a brother, and I admire his recovery journey. I hope you've had a good time tonight understanding how important steps 1, 2, and 3 are, because if we're not honest, we're not open-minded, and we're not willing, steps 4 through 12, we won't even be around when steps 4 through 12 become necessary for the rest of our journey. Steps 1, 2, and 3 are the surrender steps. Steps 4 through 9 are the steps that we have used to get well. And steps 10, 11, and 12 are the steps we continue to use to stay well. And I hope you've had a wonderful journey. Jason, say goodbye, and thanks for being on the show.
Thank you so much. It's so good to see you.
It's great to see you as well. I miss you.
Okay, man.
Of all the people I miss, I think I miss you the most. It'd be like Dorothy missing Toto.
Awesome.
Oh, awesome, brother. You have a great night, and thank you for being a part of the Recovery Guy podcast.
Appreciate it. Okay, you have a good night, Robert.
You bet. Bye. You bet. Remember, we get broken apart, but we get whole together. Thank you and good night.